My daughter-in-law offered to upgrade me. She didn't know I wrote the textbook. Chloe was standing in the doorway of her own living room, holding her work bag and looking at three tattooed men installing an acoustic ceiling panel above her couch. She did not say anything for a moment. The tallest one, Rick, had a drill. Dave was measuring something. Thomas was on his phone, presumably looking up specifications. They had been here since 2 in the afternoon. It was now 6:47. What is happening? Rick turned around. "Oh, you must be Chloe. Eleanor mentioned you. I'm Rick." He gestured at the ceiling. "The acoustics in here are terrible, by the way. Did you ever notice the echo?" "Where is Eleanor?" "Kitchen. We had coffee. She was explaining Aristotle's rhetorical triangle. Turns out it applies directly to Instagram Reels. Very interesting." Eleanor came out of the kitchen with a cup in one hand and her phone in the other. "Oh, you're early." "Yes, the 15th works. Standard format. 90 minutes, open questions. I'll moderate myself." "Good. Talk soon." She ended the call. "Chloe, this is Rick and Dave and Thomas. They just need to finish the ceiling panel. You don't mind if they stay through dinner?" "What ceiling panel?" "Acoustic. For the podcast. The echo in here is genuinely bad." Chloe looked at the ceiling panel. She looked at the three men. She looked at Eleanor. "You came for 2 weeks." "I extended. Rick had questions about episode 4. Rick is a biker. Rick is a biker with very precise questions about narrative structure. He quotes your workshop sometimes, actually. You'd know where it comes from if you read the footnotes." Rick, without turning around. "It's from a book, Chloe. I checked. My name is Eleanor West. I'm 64 years old. 2 weeks ago, my daughter-in-law Chloe told her colleagues, while I was standing 3 feet away putting salad on my plate, that I was a little lost in the modern world, and offered to sign me up for a course in digital etiquette and contemporary social presence. She held my hand when she said it. She was very warm. I thanked her. I went to the guest room, and I started thinking about one thing Chloe doesn't know about me, that she never asked, that she could have found herself in 5 minutes. On the internet, she so badly wants to explain to me. That's how we got here, with Rick and the ceiling panel. Mark, my son, called me in September to say that Chloe had found a great apartment in their building, with a view and good light, and he thought I'd love it, meaning would I like to move closer? Meaning would I consider giving up my own home of 26 years to be near them? I said I'd visit first. I booked 2 weeks. The drive took 4 hours. Mark met me at the door. He looked good, a little tired around the eyes, the way he'd looked since he was 8 years old and trying to manage too many things at once, but good. He hugged me properly, which he'd gotten better at in his 30s. He carried my bag upstairs and showed me the guest room, which had good light and a window that looked onto the street and a bed I could tell Chloe had made up carefully. Fresh sheets, a folded towel, a small plant on the windowsill. It was a kind room. I liked it immediately. Chloe came home at 7. She was smaller than I remembered from the wedding, not physically, but in the way people seem smaller in their own space than in formal photographs. She had dark hair and very good posture, and the particular energy of someone who has structured their day down to the minute and is now in the process of transitioning between modes. Eleanor. She hugged me, quick, decided, smelling of something expensive. "You look wonderful. How was the drive?" "Fine. 4 hours. No traffic after the 2nd hour. I made reservations at the Italian place on Clement, unless you're tired." "I'm not tired." "Perfect." She was already moving toward the bedroom to change. "Mark, did you tell her about the neighborhood? She should know about the farmer's market on Saturdays." Mark told me about the farmer's market. I ate dinner. I watched them together. the small coordinations of people who have lived with each other long enough that everything runs on unspoken systems. Chloe ordered for the table without asking, which I noticed, and which I recognized as efficiency rather than presumption, at least the first time. The first week was fine. I walked in the mornings, I cooked twice, I read in the evenings while they watched things on a screen that I could hear from the guest room and that seemed to involve a great deal of competitive cooking. On the third day, I was having coffee at the kitchen table when Chloe came downstairs and started talking to Mark, who was also in the kitchen eating toast 12 inches from me, about me. "I was thinking," she said, pouring her coffee, "that we should help Eleanor build some structure into her days. Retirement can be disorienting. People lose their sense of purpose. Maybe a morning routine, some social activities." "I'm sitting right here," I said. "Of course," she turned. The warmth was immediate, genuine seeming. "I just mean, do you have things you want to do while you're here? I want to make sure you feel supported." "I feel fine." "Of course you do," the smile again. "I just know how it can be. My grandmother really struggled after she stopped working. It happens to a lot of people." I looked at her. She was 33 years old, and she was comparing me to her grandmother, and she meant it entirely kindly, and that, I thought, was the most interesting part. "What kind of work did your grandmother do?" I asked. "She was a bookkeeper, lovely woman." Chloe sat down across from me. "What about you? What do you miss most about working?" I thought about the seminar I'd been teaching for 19 years, the one on classical rhetoric and modern persuasion that consistently had a waitlist of 40 students. I thought about the doctoral student whose dissertation I'd supervised last spring, who had defended successfully and sent me flowers and a 3-paragraph email about what my notes had meant to her. I thought about the paper I'd submitted in June that was currently under peer review. "The students," I said, which was true, just not complete. "That's so sweet." Chloe patted my hand. "You were a teacher?" "Something like that." On the 5th day, the book appeared on my nightstand. Digital Literacy for the Modern Senior, a bookmark on page 1. The chapter was called, "What is the Internet?" I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it for a while. I had published 42 academic papers. I had a profile on academia.edu with 5,217 citations. I had been writing emails since 1989, when the university first installed the system, and most of my colleagues refused to use it because they found it impersonal. I had taught a seminar on digital rhetoric for 11 years. I put the book in the nightstand drawer. Then I opened my laptop for the first time since arriving and looked at my academia.edu inbox, which I hadn't checked in 3 years. 48 messages. I started reading. The dinner was on the 9th day. Chloe's colleagues, 4 of them, all from the HR consulting firm where she was a director. They arrived at 7. They were the kind of people who wore their professional identities like clothes they hadn't taken off. Everything slightly polished, slightly careful, conversations that moved efficiently between topics. Chloe had made something with salmon that looked architectural. I helped carry dishes from the kitchen. I sat at the end of the table. I listened. The conversation moved to work. Chloe was describing a workshop she'd run that week, a corporate communication training for a financial services firm. 45 managers, full day, focus on what she called authentic relational presence in high-stakes conversations. The challenge, she said, cutting her salmon, is that most people in corporate environments have learned to communicate defensively. They're not actually listening, they're preparing their response. So the whole first half of the day is just getting them to hear. Her colleague, a woman named Diane, nodded. "How do you break that pattern?" "Mirror listening," Chloe set down her fork. "You teach them to reflect back what they heard before responding. Not paraphrase, actually mirror the emotional register, not just the content. Once people feel genuinely heard, the defensive posture drops. I was eating. I did not say anything. Mirror listening. Chapter 7, page 142. The technique I had developed over 3 years of classroom research in the mid-90s, published first as a conference paper in 1996, and then formalized in the textbook in 1998. The key distinction, the one Chloe had just blurred, was that mirror listening was specifically not about reflecting emotional register. That was affective mirroring, a different technique with different applications and different risks. Conflating them was a common error. I had written about why it was an error in a footnote on page 146. I had another bite of salmon. Eleanor, Chloe said, and her voice shifted, warmer, slower, the voice she used when addressing me in company. I was just thinking, you mentioned you're finding the transition a bit, a bit quiet since retiring? I had not mentioned this. I had said I was sleeping well and enjoying the morning walks. I think there are some wonderful resources, she continued. I actually know someone who runs a course. Contemporary Digital Presence and Social Etiquette. It's designed for people who are, finding their footing again, re-entering the social landscape. The table was quiet in the particular way tables go quiet when something uncomfortable is happening and everyone is deciding whether to acknowledge it. I think you'd love it, Chloe said. It would give you things to talk about with everyone. The modern world moves fast, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. Diane was looking at her salmon. Chloe reached over and put her hand on mine. We just want you to feel less lost. I looked at her hand on mine. I looked at the table. 4 people with careful expressions. Mark, at the other end, was looking at his plate. That's very thoughtful, Chloe. We can look into it together. It would be fun. I'd like that. Her face opened into genuine warmth. She squeezed my hand. I smiled back. I finished my salmon. I listened to the rest of the conversation. At 10 o'clock, I said I was tired and went to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed and thought, with complete clarity, about what had just happened. She had positioned me, publicly, in front of witnesses, with maximum warmth, as someone who needed managing, someone who was behind, someone to be helped along. She had done it the way people do when they want the credit for the helping and none of the friction of the helped person objecting. And she had done it while misexplaining a concept from my own book. I opened my laptop. I found the email from the podcast producer who had written in January, 8 months ago, no reply, asking if I'd be interested in a series on rhetoric and public discourse for a serious adult audience. I wrote back, Dear Mr. Okafor, apologies for the delay. I'd be glad to discuss this. Are you still interested? E. West. He replied at 11:47 that same night. Professor West, still interested, doesn't begin to cover it. Are you free this week? I went to the digital etiquette course. I want to be clear about this. I went. 3 sessions, Tuesday and Thursday and the following Tuesday, in a bright room with 12 other people and an instructor named Jason, who was 29 and had a certificate in digital communications and a great deal of enthusiasm. The first session covered personal branding. The second covered what Jason called narrative architecture, by which he meant the structure of a social media post. The third covered something called authentic voice, which Jason described as speaking from your genuine self rather than a performed persona. In the second session, Jason quoted almost verbatim a paragraph from my 1993 article in the Journal of Communication on performed versus authentic identity in public speech. He did not cite it. I do not think he knew where it came from. I wrote it down in my notebook. I put a small star next to it. I did not say anything. Chloe posted a story after the second session. A photograph she'd taken of me in the lobby, smiling, with the caption, "Never too late to learn something new. My mother-in-law is inspiring me every day." 812 likes. One comment from an account I didn't recognize. "Wait, is that Professor West from the rhetoric department? She literally wrote the textbook on this." The comment disappeared within the hour. I found out later because 230 people had already screenshotted it. I found this out because one of them sent it to me. His name was Danny. He'd been in my Introduction to Rhetoric seminar in 2011, was now a communications director at a mid-sized tech company, and had seen the screenshot circulating in a group chat of former students who followed Chloe's Instagram because, as he put it in his message, she posts a lot of content that sounds extremely familiar. He sent me the screenshot. He sent me 4 others. I looked at them for a long time. Then I called Rick. I had met Rick at the public library 3 days earlier. The branch on Arguello runs a community lecture series, small, unpublicized, mostly attended by retirees and the occasional student who wanders in. The organizer had found my academia.edu profile and asked, somewhat tentatively, if I'd be willing to give an informal talk on rhetoric in everyday life. I said yes. 26 people came. Rick was one of them. He was 41, ran a vegan food co-op with a small delivery operation, and had spent the previous 2 years trying to figure out why his community newsletters weren't getting responses. He stayed afterward. We talked for an hour. He had, as I would tell Chloe later, very precise questions. At the end of the conversation, he said, "Can I come back next week?" I said, "There wasn't a next week scheduled." He said, "Can we schedule one?" That was how it started. Not with a plan, with a man who had a genuine question and actually wanted the answer. Rick brought Dave the following week. Dave ran the co-op's social media, reluctantly, badly, with the energy of someone who had been volunteered for a job they didn't understand. He had specific problems, posts that didn't land, messages that created conflict instead of resolving it, announcements that people ignored. I spent 90 minutes on audience analysis and message framing. Dave took notes on his phone. At the end, he said, "This is the most useful thing anyone has ever explained to me about communication." I said, "It's chapter 3. He asked, "Chapter 3 of what?" I told him. He ordered the book that evening. He texted me the next morning. "I've been making the same mistake on page 78 for 2 years. Thomas came the week after that. Thomas edited short video content for 3 different small businesses and had a problem with retention. People clicked away before the point of the video landed. We talked about classical argument structure and why the modern instinct to lead with conclusion first often backfired with certain audiences. He filmed 12 seconds of the conversation on his phone. He posted it, not as a clip of me, as a note. Just learned something from a retired professor that explains why my videos keep failing. The Greeks figured this out 2,000 years ago, and we keep reinventing it wrong. 14,000 views in 2 days. Rick quoted it in the co-op newsletter. 11 people responded who had never responded before. The newsletter worked. It worked because you changed the opening paragraph. The rest was already fine. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why are you doing this, teaching us? You could be, I don't know, retired." I thought about this. I am retired. This is different from not working. He nodded slowly. He wrote something in the notebook he'd started bringing. The TikTok happened without my permission, and I want to state that clearly. Rick filmed 30 seconds of a conversation we were having about what he called corporate speak, the way certain phrases drain meaning from communication while appearing to add it. I was explaining the linguistic mechanism, which is genuinely interesting, and which I had written about in 2007. He posted it with the caption, "Old Lady Destroys Corporate Communication in 30 Seconds. 400,000 views in 3 days. It's doing really well, old lady." I thought it was ironic. Irony requires the subject to have accepted the framing. I haven't accepted it. I can take it down. Don't take it down. But next time, ask me first. An old lady is doing work you didn't intend. It's telling the audience how to position me before I've said a word. That's the opposite of what you want if the content is about people dismissing voices they shouldn't dismiss. A long pause. That's exactly what I did. Yes. What should I have called it? That's a better question than you realize. We'll talk about it Tuesday. He changed the caption to "Retired Rhetoric Professor on Why Corporate Language Makes Everyone Stupider." Kept the views, added 600 comments from people who worked in offices. Chloe saw the video on Thursday. I know because Mark mentioned, carefully, over dinner that evening, that Chloe had watched something online that had surprised her a little. I passed the salad. I did not ask what it was. The dinner that Thursday was otherwise unremarkable except for one moment. Chloe asked me, very casually, what I had done before retiring. Not what I taught, what I did. There was a difference in the question that I noticed. I told her I had taught rhetoric and communication theory for 31 years. "And before that?" she asked. "I did my doctorate, studied classical argument structure and its applications in modern persuasion." "Where?" I told her. A brief pause. The university I had attended for my doctorate was not a small one. "That's a good program." It was a good program. Still is. She nodded. She changed the subject. But I noticed that afterwards she was quieter than usual. And twice I caught her looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. Not the warmth she used at dinner tables, and not the efficient pleasantness of daily life. Something more careful, something recalibrating. I passed the bread. I said nothing. The message from Danny arrived the following Monday. His name was Danny Reyes. He'd been in my Introduction to Rhetoric seminar in 2011, the large one I ran every fall that always had a wait list. He was now a communications director at a mid-sized technology company in the city, which I had not known until he told me. He had found me, he said, through Chloe's Instagram, specifically through the story she had posted outside the digital etiquette course. He had recognized me immediately. He said, "I saw the story and I thought, that's Professor West." Then I read the caption, "Never too late to learn something new." And I thought, does she know what she's looking at? He had not been the only one. He sent me the screenshot of the comment thread before Chloe deleted it. He sent me 3 others from different group chats, former students, colleagues from the field, people in communications who followed Chloe's professional content and had recognized the name, if not the face. He also sent me, with some hesitation, a document, a compiled list that he and 2 other former students had been keeping informally for approximately 4 months. It was a list of Chloe's workshop content, post by post, slide by slide, the ones that were publicly available. Next to each item, a citation, the source, the paper, the page, the year. 14 entries. Some were distant enough that a reasonable person might call them influence rather than citation. Some were not distant at all. I sat with the document for a long time. Then I wrote back to Danny, "Thank you. Please don't share this further. I'll handle it." He wrote back, "Of course. She's probably not even aware." Most people aren't. That's the problem. Most people aren't. That was the part that stayed with me. Not malice, not plagiarism in the deliberate sense, just the thing where knowledge moves through the world and loses its origins along the way, and eventually someone teaches a concept with confidence without knowing they're standing on a foundation someone else spent years building. It happens constantly. It had happened to me 3 times over my career, in ways I'd been able to document, and twice in ways I couldn't. It was not unique to Chloe. It was not even particularly her fault. But it had happened in my son's living room while she held my hand and called me lost. That was the part that was specific to her. I put Danny's document in a folder and closed it. Then I called James Okafor and told him I was ready to start recording. The workshop incident I heard about secondhand from Danny, who heard about it from a colleague who had been in the room. Chloe was running her corporate communication training, the one she'd described at the dinner table, the one with mirror listening. 40 managers, full day, a financial services company in the financial district. She was 3 hours in when a man named Jeffrey Carlisle raised his hand. Jeffrey Carlisle was a senior vice president who had, Danny told me, read a great deal of communication theory in graduate school in the 90s. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I want to make sure I'm following. You're describing mirror listening as reflecting the emotional register, but isn't that actually affective mirroring? My understanding is they're distinct techniques with different risk profiles." Chloe kept her expression. "They're often used together in applied contexts," she said. "The distinction matters more in research settings." "The distinction matters in practice, too," Jeffrey said, pleasantly. "Effective mirroring without the cognitive component can actually escalate conflict in high-stakes conversations rather than de-escalate it. There's a fairly well-known paper on this, West, I think, 1998? The original mirror listening framework specifically separates them." A pause. "Of course," Chloe said. "That's a useful nuance. Thank you." She continued the workshop. She was, by all accounts, professional and unruffled. That evening, she Googled Eleanor West Rhetoric Textbook. She found the book in 40 seconds. She found my faculty page in another 20. She found the academia.edu profile with the citation count in 30 more. She found the TikTok in the related results. She sat with all of this for a period of time that Danny's colleague estimated, from the outside, at approximately 20 minutes. Then Chloe's boss sent a message to the company Slack. "Has anyone seen this TikTok? Rhetoric professor absolutely nails why corporate communication training often fails. Chloe, isn't this your mother-in-law? Impressive." Chloe read it in the elevator on the way up to her office. The elevator went to the 14th floor. She wrote it back down without getting off. She came home that evening and found Rick and Dave and Thomas in her living room installing an acoustic ceiling panel. That was the moment we started from. After I said what I said about the footnotes, and after Rick confirmed it without turning around, the room was quiet for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. Chloe set her bag down. She was still in her coat. "Eleanor, can we talk?" "Of course." "Could you give us a few minutes?" Rick looked at me. I nodded. He put down the drill. The 3 of them went to the kitchen with the studied discretion of men who had learned when to disappear. Chloe sat down. I sat across from her. She still had her coat on. She had the precise, controlled expression of someone who runs difficult conversations professionally and is now in one herself. "I want to talk about what's happening," she said. "I feel like there's been a miscommunication." "What do you feel has been miscommunicated?" "I suggested the digital etiquette course because I thought it would help you, not because I thought you were... I wasn't trying to diminish you. I was trying to include you." "I know that's what you thought you were doing." A pause. The way you said that implies that's not what you were actually doing. Chloe, when you told your colleagues I was lost in the modern world, you said that to a room of people who don't know me. You positioned me publicly before I'd said a word. That's not inclusion. That's management. I was trying to explain you were trying to look like the thoughtful daughter-in-law who takes care of her husband's aging mother. I understand why. It's a reasonable thing to want to look like. But I was sitting there and I wasn't consulted, and I've spent 31 years studying exactly this, the gap between what people say and what they're doing when they say it. I know what that dinner table moment was. Chloe was very still. And, I continued, in that same conversation, you explained mirror listening incorrectly to 4 people, which would be fine. Everyone makes errors. But you explained it from a framework you hadn't read carefully, and the framework is mine. Page 142. The mistake you made is on page 146 in a footnote, specifically because I anticipated that people would make it. The silence was different now. You wrote the textbook I use. 2 of them. The second one is less widely assigned. She looked at the ceiling, not at the acoustic panel, past it. Why didn't you say anything? At dinner, why didn't you just tell me? I thought about this. It was a fair question. Because you didn't ask me anything about myself in 9 days. You asked me how the drive was, you asked if I was tired, you told your colleagues I was adjusting, you put a book on my nightstand with a bookmark on page 1. When someone has decided who you are before you've spoken, correcting them in public isn't a conversation. It's a confrontation. I don't like confrontations. So instead I started returning emails. The rest followed naturally. Mark appeared in the doorway. He had been in the hallway for at least the last 4 minutes. I had heard him stop walking. Mom. Hi, sweetheart. You could have said something to me earlier. You didn't ask either. He looked at Chloe. She looked at him. Something passed between them that I wasn't meant to read and didn't try to. How long are you actually staying? I told Mr. Okafor I could record through the end of the month. After that, I'll reassess. Who is Mr. Okafor? The podcast producer. I stood up. Rick and the others should finish the panel tonight if we let them. The recording quality really is quite bad without it. I looked at Chloe. I protected you with Jeffrey Carlisle, by the way. He emailed me. I told him the distinction was a deliberate simplification for an applied audience. He accepted that. You won't hear from him about it again. Chloe looked at me. Why did you do that? Because you're my son's wife, and because being right isn't the same as being useful. Rick and the others finished the panel at 9:15. They said goodnight with the easy politeness of people who had understood the room without being told anything about it. Rick shook Mark's hand. Thomas showed me a thumbnail concept for the podcast cover on his phone. Clean, typographic, my name larger than I'd expected. Is that too large? He asked. No, it's fine. They left. Mark made tea. The 3 of us sat at the kitchen table and didn't say very much, which was its own kind of conversation. At some point, Chloe said, not looking up from her cup, the mirror listening thing, the footnote on page 146. Yes, I've been teaching it wrong for 2 years. Probably longer. It's a common error. Can I ask you something? She looked up. The course, the digital etiquette thing, did you learn anything? I thought about Jason and his certificate and his genuine enthusiasm and the paragraph he'd unknowingly quoted from my 1993 paper. I learned that the field has moved, Not in ways that invalidate what I know, but it's applied differently now. The vocabulary has changed. Some of the problems are genuinely new. Jason doesn't know what he's building on, but he's building on something real. That's generous. It's accurate. Generous would be pretending he didn't miss the source material. Mark was looking at me the way he'd looked since he was about 12, like he was trying to catch up with something. Mom, why didn't you ever talk about it? What you actually do? You never asked what I did exactly. You knew I was a professor. People don't usually ask their parents what they actually spend their days thinking about. It's not a criticism. It's just how it goes. I should have asked. You can ask now. He did. We talked until midnight. Chloe was quieter, listening more than speaking. She asked 2 questions, both precise, both better than Mark's, which I thought said something true about her that the previous 2 weeks hadn't shown. At midnight, I said I was going to bed. Mark hugged me properly. Chloe said goodnight. At the door of the guest room, I turned. The course, I said. I'm not going back, but if you want to go through the footnotes in Chapter 7 together sometime, I'm available. She looked at me for a moment. I'd like that. I went to bed. In the living room, there was an acoustic ceiling panel that hadn't been there that morning. By the end of the month, there would be 18 recorded episodes. By the end of the year, 1 would be assigned in an undergraduate communications course at a university I had never visited. The podcast launched in November. Rick handled audio. Dave managed social media with a competence that surprised everyone, including Dave. Thomas did visuals, clean, nothing that didn't need to be there. Chloe came to the 3rd recording session. She sat in the back and watched. Afterward, she asked James 1 question about distribution. He answered. She nodded. On the way out, she said, "You're framing in the 2nd segment, leading with the Aristotle point before you needed it. That's what I do wrong in my workshops. I lead with the framework instead of earning it." Yes. How do you know when you've earned it? When the room asks for it. When they've felt the problem before you name it. She was quiet. I've been doing this 6 years, and no one explained that to me clearly. You never asked someone who knew. She looked at me, not with the warmth from the dinner table, something more direct. Can I bring you to a workshop? As an expert, I'd introduce you properly. 1 condition. What? Correct the mirror listening section first, before I'm in the room. Deal. Before I left in January, Chloe gave me a copy of my own book, bought new, read carefully. I could tell from the spine and from the single question she asked on my last morning about a passage in Chapter 9 that most people skip. The speaker who performs confidence without authority borrows a currency they cannot repay. What does that mean in practice? It means you can teach people to sound authoritative, but if they haven't done the work behind it, the audience feels the gap. Not consciously, but they feel it. How do you close the gap? You do the work. She nodded. I deleted the stories, the never too late ones. I know. I should have asked who you were, before any of it. I looked at her. She meant it. Yes. But you're asking now. 6 months later, a graduate student in Ohio emailed me, writing her dissertation on applied rhetoric in digital contexts. Found my work through the podcast. Question about Chapter 7. We corresponded 3 weeks. At the end, she asked if I'd accept an acknowledgement in the dissertation. I said yes. She wrote back, "My advisor used your textbook in her own graduate program. She said it was the clearest thing she'd ever read on the subject." I forwarded the email to Chloe without comment. Chloe replied 4 hours later. Chapter 7, page 142. I know. Then, a minute later, thank you for the footnote. I put the phone down. 31 years, 42 papers, 2 books, 5,217 citations. And what stayed with me was a graduate student in Ohio with a genuine question and a daughter-in-law who had finally started asking the right ones. It is not nothing. It might even be enough.